Good afternoon. Welcome to the July 27, 2023 City of Glendale Audit Committee meeting. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. Public comments on a specific agenda item will be taken when that agenda item is discussed. Roll call, please.
Audit Committee Member Edward Belen. Ed Kashadurian.
Here.
Jack Mavian is absent. Alex Parajon.
Present.
And Thomas O'Shaughnessy.
Present.
Next item, please.
Item number 2, business agenda. Part A, report of recording secretary regarding posting of agenda. The agenda for the July 27, 2023 Audit Committee meeting was posted on July 24, 2023 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Next item is our communication.
Did you want me to call them?
Hold on, let me see if there's any calls. There's no call, and we don't have any card, so at this point, so that concludes the item number 3, our communication. We don't have any. So at this point, members of the committee, due to the vacancy of the audit committee chair, we would like to move up action item 5A, election of audit committee chair. And then once a new chair is elected, he will preside the rest of the meeting. So Ani, could you please read the item into the record?
Item 5, action items, Part A, election of audit committee chair.
So now it's...
I would pose a question to my fellow commissioners. Has anyone decided to step forward and express an interest?
I'll be interested if no one else wants it.
In that case, I move that we nominate our fellow commissioner to our far left, meaning sitting.
Does this motion need a second right now?
It does not. Nominations only need a single nomination for this process. You don't need a second for any of them, and you may nominate yourselves.
Okay.
I nominated him.
And it sounds as though we're hearing no other nominations. I suppose we can have roll call.
Audit Committee Member Edward Belen.
Yes.
Ed Kashadurian.
Yes.
Jack Mavian is absent. Alex Parajon.
I guess I approve myself.
And Thomas O'Shaughnessy.
Affirmative.
All right. Do they need to switch chairs?
Congratulations, and you should
All right.
switch chairs.
All right.
Oh,
I guess I have to.
Congratulations.
this side?
I'll take my name badge too.
If you don't mind, let me take my jacket as well.
Thanks for keeping the seat warm for me. All right, thank you, everyone. Thanks for my fellow commissioners who are, looking at my leadership for this next couple of years. Well, actually 1 year, right? It's a 1-year term, I hope. And looking forward to doing what I can to help the committee do what we can throughout the year. All right, next item on the agenda, please. I think we need to do 5B as well.
Item number 5B, election of audit committee secretary.
Okay, any nominations?
I would move that we continue with the acceptance of a member of the finance staff for the City of Glendale being the secretary for the commission.
Internal audit. So staff from actually internal audit division of the Management Services Department.
With the amended correction, Management Department. Thank you.
Management Service, sorry.
I second that. Roll call?
Audit Committee Member Edward Belen.
Yes.
Ed Kashadurian.
Yes.
Jack Mavian is absent. Thomas O'Shaughnessy.
Yes.
And Chair Alex Parajon.
Yes. Congratulations. All right, next, should we move up now to the approval of minutes? 4A, or should we go to 5C to finish the 5 of column? And the report of City Council, or should we do the?
Finish the 5, and then,
Okay, that's fine.
Move on.
We can finish the 5. All right.
5C, Annual Report to City Council.
Do we have it? Where we need to sign it and read it?
Needs to be read into the
you don't
record.
have to read the whole thing. You can just, take a moment and read it and then approve. I prepared the copies for you to sign after the
Well,
meeting.
if you have read it, can we just move to approve it, or? So I have, Mr. Chair, I have read it, so.
We read it already?
Yeah.
Everyone else has read it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's move on to approve the annual report to City Council. Roll call on that?
Audit Committee Member Edward Belen.
Yes.
Ed Kashadurian.
Yes.
Jack Mavian is absent. Thomas O'Shaughnessy.
Affirmative.
And Chair Alex Parajon.
Approved. Great. Thank you. Let's move up to the approval of minutes, item 4.
Item 4, approval of minutes. A, minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on January 26, 2023. For this meeting, Committee Member Kashadurian, Chair Parajon, and Jack Mavian were present. Jack Mavian is absent. Therefore, Committee Member Kashadurian and Chair Parajon can move to approve.
I'll move to approve.
I second that. Do we need to do roll call on that? Roll call, right?
That's correct. And it is also fine for those who were not present initially to not abstain at this time. What you are doing by remaining in the vote and roll calling in the affirmative is expressing confidence in staff's ability to take accurate action notes for the minutes. If there is something which needs to be brought up, it would be ideal if somebody has reviewed those things in the past. If somebody has something to bring up, that's fine. Otherwise, there is no need to abstain, despite the fact that some of you have not been at the meeting or possibly even reviewed it.
Okay, great. So let's do roll call on the minutes.
Audit Committee Member Edward Belen.
Affirmative.
Ed Kashadurian.
Yes.
Jack Mavian is absent. Thomas O'Shaughnessy.
Accept.
And Chair Alex Parajon.
I approve. Next item, 4B.
Item 4B, minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on April 27th, 2023.
Mr. Chair, I just move to approve.
Second.
All right, roll call on that.
Audit Committee Member Edward Belen.
Approve.
Ed Kashadurian.
Yes.
Jack Mavian is absent. Thomas O'Shaughnessy.
Approve.
And Chair Alex Parajon.
I was absent, but I approved because I watched it on the TV. All right, next item.
Item,
Let's see.
So,
Reports?
Mr. Chair, I would like to request that we move 6C to the front.
Okay,
so that
perfect.
the external auditor can do her presentation and
Beat traffic, right?
yeah, exactly.
All right, let's do that. Let's have the representative from the Clifton Larson Allen LLP to step up, and let's do 6C, please.
Item 6C, report from Clifton Larson Allen LLP on the audit of fiscal year ended June 30, 2023. Teresa Clark, Finance Accounting Manager.
Good afternoon, Chair Parhon and committee members. I'm here today to present the information about the city's fiscal year 2022-2023 audit. The city's current external auditor is Clifton Larson Allen, or CLA. This is their 4th year with the city under the current contract. For the fiscal year 2023 audit, the CLA staff has already started the preliminary fieldwork last June 12. When the first draft of the annual comprehensive financial report is completed in October, CLA staff will be back again for another 3 weeks to complete the audit. We expect to get the opinion letter from CLA in the 3rd week of November and present the annual comprehensive financial report to the City Council in early December. We'll be back here to present the audit results to the committee in January 2024. So now I would like to call Daphne Munoz, engagement partner from Clifton Larson Allen, for her presentation.
Welcome, Ms. Munoz.
Thank you. Again, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Again, my name is Daphne Munoz, and I am the principal at Clifton Larson Allen, and I am here today to present to you to discuss the fiscal year 2023 audit. So, there's 3 things that I'm going to go over. I'm going to go over our scope of our services, the responsibility of management and those charged with governance, and our responsibility as auditors, and lastly, the timing of our audit. So for our scope of our services, we will be performing an audit of the financial statements for the City of Glendale, which will be included in the annual comprehensive financial report, and that will also include the financial statements of the electric utility and water utility funds. The city spent more than $750,000 in federal expenditures. Therefore, the city is required to have what we call a single audit of federal grants, and that is a compliance audit in connection with the financial statement audit of the city's compliance with federal grants. We will also perform an agreed-upon procedures on the report submitted to the National Transit Database, and we were going to be certifying the REACT reports submitted to HUD regarding the Section 8. And lastly, we will also be performing an audit of the financial statements of the ICIS JPA. So our main responsibility for the city is to form and express an opinion on whether the financial statements that are prepared by management are presented fairly in all material respects in conformity with GAAP. Our audit will be performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. We will be designing our audit procedures to obtain reasonable assurance rather than absolute. Reasonable means that we will not attempt to ensure that all the data that happened during the year are 100% accurate. Rather, we will be doing our audit on a test basis. Therefore, we could only provide and obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are not materially misstated. Our audit will include consideration of internal controls over financial reporting as a basis for determining the audit procedures, whether our audit procedures are appropriate for this in this circumstance, but not for the purpose of providing opinion on the internal controls or the effectiveness of the internal control over financial reporting. And our audit will also include performing tests of city's compliance with certain provisions of laws, grants, contracts, and amounts. Again, the objective of our audit is not to provide opinion on the compliance rather than whether non-compliance could affect a misstatement in the financial statements. However, though, if during our review of the internal controls over financial reporting and compliance with certain grants, and something came to our attention that we think is relevant to the responsibilities of those charged with governance, we will be providing a recommendation and a letter in our audit report, and that will be presented to the Audit Committee and those charged with governance. So our audit does not relieve the management with those charged with governance with their responsibilities. Management responsible for preparation of the financial statements, the design and adherence to internal controls over financial reporting, and also for providing information for audit, including written representation at the conclusion of our audit that the management has provided us everything that is necessary for our audit. So as far as timing, as Teresa mentioned, we have performed our first phase, which is the internal interim audit, and that is when we do our planning, we do our inquiry and documentation of internal controls, and we've also do our test of controls to see if what was represented to us as far as internal controls are working as they were designed and as they were represented to us. And then in October, we will be back for the year-end audit phase. This is what we normally call as a final audit. At this time, we will, based on our the risk assessments that we will be performing during planning, we will be doing some account analysis and some substantive procedures, which includes confirmations and some cutoff procedures. And the last phase of the audits, again, is the preparation. The city will prepare the annual comprehensive financial report, which includes the introductory section, financial section, and statistical section. And we will be assisting the city, helping the city review that to make sure it is not materially misstated and it conforms and is it meets all the general requirements of financial statements. And lastly, I just want to go over the two new standards that the city will have to implement in 2023. There's the GASB 94, which is a statement issued by Government Accounting Standards Board that provides guidance on certain financial reporting requirements for state and local governments, specifically addressing the reporting requirements of the fiduciary activities in the governmental financial statements. 96 is for subscription-based information technology arrangements. This is similar to 87, which is the lease statement, and there will just be the way it's often referred to as CIBIDA. So for any technology arrangements that fall within the standards will be reported as an intangible with a corresponding liability for the long-term liability related to the CIBIDA. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. I would like to have my commissioners here ask any questions.
I have a quick question. You mentioned something about ICIS JPA. Could you just define what that is?
Oh, that's the interoperable, we often refer to this, but it's a JPA that the city is actually a member of, and it's another entity, and then it's just part of our contract that we also perform that audit. Which
So
the city performs.
It's a separate audit?
It's a completely separate audit, it's completely set of financial statements for which the city is a member of, and all other, it's for the 911 communication system, and the city is a member, and actually the city performs, and the administrative as for accounting, yeah.
Great, thank you. And I have another question. I'm not exactly sure if it is related to the scope of work as far as you were concerned, but I was just watching a YouTube video a few weeks back, and it was about the bank that went bankrupt, the Silicon Valley Bank up in the Bay Area. And I think in passing, the presenter also mentioned that a lot of cities are facing difficulty in managing their financial investments. I'm not exactly sure if the city of Glendale is investing in bonds, but if they did, given the fact that the interest rates are going up, is that part of your maybe scope of work? Looking at the risks involved in investments and all of that.
So we do not look at the risk that the city takes, but what we do look is the city has an investment policy. So one of my bullet points where it says we test city's compliance with policies, and one of them is the investment policy. The city treasurer is guided by the investment policy that the city has adopted, and that investment policy also, it uses the California Code as a guide on what they can invest on. We make sure that the treasurer and the investment portfolio at 6:30, and also during the year, we test one quarter to make sure that they are in compliance with the policy. because those policy kind of addresses how the city manages risk on what they see in the risks.
I see. So in other words, it's not the impact of it, it's just that it's part of the items that you review, but you're not making any comments as far
No,
as.
so we just look at their compliance with the investment policy.
Understood. Thank you so much. I don't have any questions.
I had one question. So as far as the June work, did you see anything within your test of controls that make you do more substantive work?
No, we didn't. When we do our test of controls, that kind of determines what's substantive. Right now, we don't have any findings based on our internal control testing.
Thank you.
None at present.
I wrote some questions down for you. Let me look at them. So compared to the prior year audit that you guys did, are you estimating to have an increase in hours to perform the audit, or is it going to be around the same ballpark?
It will be around the same ballpark, with the exception of last year. We spent a lot of our time with the implementation of 87, which I think we, based on our initial conversation with the city, with the population of what they have for the implementation of 96, and actually also with 94, because I think when we were implementing 87 last year, it kind of straddled with. We have identified several arrangements that might fall under 94. So those are the ones that probably will take some of our time. And also our tests, our professional standards require us to do what we call an unpredictability. So we will be performing something that we wouldn't tell the city, so that they will not be, so they won't see that every year we're doing the same procedure. So we do have an unpredictability factor in the procedures that we perform.
And what are you projecting to be the hours?
The hours, it normally takes us about 2 to 3 weeks for final, and then about 2 to 3 weeks from the interface. I think for City of Glendale, we spent about 600 to 700 hours.
And prior year, I'm assuming you say you exceeded it because of the new gas fees, right, that you initiated?
Yeah, so we spent about 4 days on 87.
All right. And when I saw you put internal controls there, has there been an increase of internal controls that have been added this past year?
Not that we are aware of.
Just the same number? All right. And let's see here. And the one I wanted to, can you explain a little bit more the GASB 94? How's that going to be impactful this coming year?
So there's a section in GASB 94 that talks about the service concessionaire arrangements, and those are arrangements that where the city transferred operations. And again, based on when we were performing when the city was performing its determination of lease contracts that might be subject to 87 last year, there were some contracts that, upon review, we will have to revisit under 94, whether they fall under service concession arrangements. And that will have some impact on the way those arrangements are recorded in the financial statements.
And those are reflected in the balance sheet? Is that where
It will be reflected in the balance sheet. If it's a service concession arrangement, there will be an intangible, depending on whether, I think in this case, the city is the transferor of the services, of the operations.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Nunes.
I do have one question. Who decides when they're updating a GASB or adding one? And
Besides,
what's the trigger that makes that happen?
well, the government, the GASB itself issues the statement, and then they say when it has to be implemented.
So it's coming from DC.
That's the GASB board, yes.
Thank you.
No further questions?
I do have one more. So I understand 87 and 96, but 94, can you give like a 2-minute overview on that?
So 94 is actually, it's a two-part. It has something to do with a private-public partnership. If the city, if an agency partners with a private and transfer their operation. And again, part of 94 also talks about, it supersedes GASB 60, which is service concession arrangement. So just one brief example of a service concession arrangement that we are looking at as far as the city's concerned is if I think it was the golf course, right? Yeah, I think the transfer of operation of the golf course and whether that actually is just a management contract or if it's a transfer of operations of the golf course. So if it's a transfer of the operations of the golf course, then it would have fall under service concessionaire arrangements. Then we will have to report a receivable in the balance sheet. And so,
Okay, thank you.
Great. No other questions. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Next item, please.
Item
It's,
number 6A, internal audit activity report as of June 30, 2023. Jesse Jung, internal audit manager.
Let me bring this up. Right. So, good afternoon, Chair Parahone and Audit Committee members. This afternoon, I prepared a report on the internal audit activities for the quarter ended June 30th, 2023. So you probably are very familiar with this report by now, 7 sections, and we'll go over them. The first section is project completed, and we have 3 this past quarter, and we have prepared 3 short PowerPoint presentations for you. The first one is Water System Pipeline Management Program Audit. This is a contract compliance audit on the design-build agreement for GWP's Water System Pipeline Management Program. This audit is completed by our senior internal auditor, Natalie Minami-Valdivia. So I will turn the mic over to Natalie to start her presentation.
Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Padahon and fellow Audit Committee members. My name is Natalie Minami-Valdivia, and I'm a Senior Internal Auditor within the Internal Audit Division. I am here and happy to present to you the Water System Pipeline Management Program and fiscal year 2020-21 audit that was completed this past quarter. Just to provide you with a little bit of background, the Water System Pipeline Management Program is part of Glendale Water and Power's 10-year capital improvement project, capital improvement program, and it's managed by the GWP Water Division with the goal of replacing the city's water system pipeline infrastructure to improve the overall water system pipeline performance and reliability. So this will be accomplished by replacing pipes with small diameters and pipes that are due to be replaced, pipes that will improve the flow of water to the fire hydrants, and then will improve or other pipes to optimize the system and improve the capacity during high demands. The objective of our audit is to determine if adequate controls exist to ensure that the design builder is in compliance with the agreement provisions. And our audit scope is from the February 18th, 2021 notice to proceed date to December 31st, 2022. In order to accomplish our objectives, our audit process included reviewing the agreement, which included the incorporated request for proposal, the policies, including the water engineering project management handbook, and other information that includes the city's construction and demolition debris recycling ordinance. We also interviewed staff, and we interviewed staff from the GWP Water Division, Public Works Division, Public Works Department, Integrated Waste Management Division, and Construction Division, as well as the Community Development Department's Building and Safety and the City Attorney's Office. And that was to gain a better understanding of the project management process, as well as the review of the submittals, and also just their general processes. We also lastly performed detailed test work on the design builders' invoices, the extra work performed, and the project submittals to determine if they were accurately billed, recorded to the proper accounting strings, properly approved, and that the supporting documentation was received in accordance with the contract terms. Based upon our interviews, we learned that the GWP Water Division has established a water engineering project management handbook that includes standardized documentation for the project management, including folders and subfolders. And within these subfolders and folders, there's documentation including templates to assist the project manager with their project management-related tasks. So here's an example of the project calendar, a portion of the project calendar that was created to ensure that the project remained on schedule. And as you can see, on the project calendar is the initial GWP issue notice to proceed that was dated February 18th. And then it also calculates the 400 days from that notice to proceed to the required date of substantial completion as March 24th, 2022. Additionally, it shows that the actual date of substantial completion was July 20th, 22. And finally, it includes an explanation, a summary explanation for the 117-day delay between the required date of substantial completion and the actual date. As a result of our audit, we identified 7 improvement opportunities related to the following 4 categories. The first one being change orders, the second, the progress billings, the third, the project submittals, and the last one being the certificate of substantial completion. So now I'll walk you through the general categories. The first audit result category 1 includes observations number 1, 2, and 3, and is related to change orders. So observation number 1 included that there were 2 change order requests for work completed as late as September 2022 that as of the date of that have not been documented in a change order or had the additional amount or days approved by the general manager of GWP. According to GWP management, a verbal agreement was made with the design builders to issue a single change order at the end of the project that is also going to include a credit due for the difference between native soil or slurry and native soil backfill. So as of the time of our audit, the project timeline had not been adjusted, and as a result, the date of substantial completion appears to be 117 days after the contract required date. However, it is the intent of GWP management to include the 117 days as an impact of time within the change order that will be processed. Observation number 2, we identified that the design builder's proposal change order request did not specify a time impact for extra work performed. And observation number 3, we identified that the design builder's proposal request improperly included a 7% markup on the total extra work rather than the allowed difference between the extra work and the deleted work. So our recommendations to management included that they issue the change orders in a timely manner, that they correct the identified discrepancies between the agreement, the handbook, and their actual practice. And then lastly, that they enforce the proposal change order request requirements, which including the time impacts and also calculating the allowable markups on the difference between the extra work and the deleted work. Audit result category number 2 includes observation number 4 and is related to progress billings. And this observation identifies that the design builder did not submit the required documents with its monthly progress payments, and some of these documents included a solid waste disposal and diversion form that basically certifies that the project is recycling 65% of its related solid waste. And then the second is that there was a schedule of values that did not contain separate line items for the subcontractor work by name and trade in compliance with the agreement terms. And then the last is the certified payroll records were not received, and that's used to confirm that the design builder is paying its employees a minimum of the prevailing minimum wage. So our recommendations to management included enforcing the progress billing requirements, including the submission of the solid waste disposal and diversion form, the schedule of values with separate line items for the subcontractor performed work, and then the submission of the certified payroll records. Audit result category number 3 includes audit observation 5 and 7. And for audit observation number 5, the DBE did not submit agreement required submittals. And these submittals included things such as the design builder's daily work reports, the project schedule updates, the chlorination emergency response plans, and then payroll and fringe benefit related reports. So on observation number 7, we noted that the agreement erroneously references a business tax registration requirement that does not exist within the city of Glendale. So our recommendations to management included that we update and that we review and complete the submittal log for each project. So that review would include reviewing the timelines and making sure that they're reasonable and or adjusting them as they see appropriate. And then the second is to review and replace the business tax registration requirement in future agreements with the applicable document. So the last and final audit result category, number 4, includes observation number 6, and it's related to the certificate of substantial completion. So observation number 6, as a result of the design builder not submitting the required documents that I had mentioned, related to the credit that's due for the difference between the slurry and the native soil backfill, GWP has not been able to issue the final change order or the certificate of completion. So even though the work was completed as late as September 2022, the certificate of completion has yet to be issued. So our recommendation is that the certificate of completions be issued in a timely manner. This concludes my presentation. I would like to thank the GWP Water, Public Works Department, Integrated Waste Management and Construction Divisions, the City Attorney's Office, and the Community Development Department's Building and Safety Division for their assistance throughout the audit. Also, Richard Ruel, Water Services Administrator, and I are here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. That was,
Sure.
anyone that has any questions?
I do.
Go ahead, Doctor.
When I looked at the report, I also was in a unique position to sit on the civil grand jury between 21-22. I was also the foreperson for the civil grand jury, and one of the cities we looked at under our report on water was the city of Glendale, which I recused myself from because of other involvements. But the interesting thing is, in looking at the report, which I have in front of me of the civil grand jury, it discusses the fact that 40% was installed before 1960, that ductile iron is now what in the report shows what was used for the piping. No PVC was mentioned because most of the soil is low corrosive, and PVC is used where it is higher corrosive. But since they were not able to complete the response on slurry and backfill, I'm just curious why no PVC was used, or what the problem is with the delay in the report on the backfill.
Well, good afternoon, Audit Committee members. Richard Ruel, Water Services Administrator, GWP. I think I heard a couple of questions there. The use of PVC versus ductile iron, that was the subject of the grand jury's investigation, questioning, I believe. I was not really involved in that. My predecessor, Mike DeGhetto, I think, wrote a detailed response to that. But in general, in summary, PVC is not considered the best use, the best material for piping in an urban setting because it doesn't withstand the heavy traffic load that we experience. It's much more popular in rural settings in the Inland Empire and so on. Ductile iron is the pipe of choice now by Glendale. It has been used for years. It's a more flexible ductile pipe, less prone to breakage. The slurry backfill question is essentially separate from that. The original specs called for, or I'm sorry, gave the option of using native backfill or slurry. If the contractor uses one or the other, there's a cost adjustment. But that's not really related to PVC.
Thank you very much. And I will say, and looking at the continuity report from this year's civil grand jury, the responses from the city of Glendale, the mayor, your department were excellent. And the question was just the clarification on that one issue, because we in fact had a coincidence of looking at it within the same time frame. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a few questions. In the report, you mentioned it's an unofficial water engineering project management handbook. Is there any reason why you called it out as unofficial versus official versus just not calling it out at all?
Yes, because it is in fact unofficial. This is a so-called handbook. I'm not sure that's the right term, but it was written by one of our senior engineers. Kevin Runzer did an excellent job putting this together. It was intended essentially as a training mechanism for new or newer employees on project management. It has not been vetted. It is not policy. It is an internal handbook used for our own purposes.
Got it. My sense from reading the report, though, is that audit procedures might have been based on items that were in the handbook. And if so, then isn't it then official at that point? I think that's his question more than yours.
You might have to repeat it.
Sorry.
Yes,
So in the sense, my sense is that audit procedures were based on items within the handbook and its results. Therefore, is it a training guide or is it really an official book that you guys are using
this
to
was a
project
subject
management?
of lengthy and heated debate with the audit personnel. My opinion is it should not, was not intended as a standard by which an audit would be conducted. That debate continues.
Got it. Okay. I had a question for the auditor. So in the last point about certificate of completion or substantial completion, I understand for formalities it's probably important to have, but what's the risk of not having it this late? What does, if we don't do this, then what happens? I'm just trying to understand it from a risk perspective because I don't understand.
So in this particular case, because the capitalization was done on an annual basis, the risk, I think, is fairly small. The risks that are related to the late issuance is that if it, there are a couple. Well, I guess for the city, there's probably little risk because a lot of the warranties are based on that certificate of completion as well.
Okay.
But since it hasn't been issued, the risks to the city are low.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't have any questions.
There's none? All right. Thank you for the report. I don't have any questions either. Next item, please.
I got it. What got the call? Mic is not on. Repeat. The next presentation is another contract compliance audit that is completed by our senior internal auditor, Ani Antonician. This is an audit of the IT security monitoring contract for GWP. So, Ani, you can let me bring up the slide for you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Ani Antonesian. I'm a senior internal auditor within the Internal Audit Division within Management Services. Today I'll be reviewing an audit we recently completed on the Insight Public Sector, Inc. Agreement So this agreement is a professional services agreement. It was executed in 2022 between the city and Inside Public Sector, Inc. And they essentially provide the city with remote infrastructure monitoring and security monitoring, managed and professional services. And they also do additional direct IT support for Glendale Water and Power. This PSA is administered by GWP, but the invoices are paid by Information Technology. The scope of work, as we reviewed it in the contract, is quite large. Essentially, what it boils down to is an outsourced IT services for GWP. But it includes in itself, for instance, the first item is monitoring and notification. So they monitor all of the devices and services that are in the PSA. They perform 24/7 alert handling and notification, change management, device backup administration. They monitor the servers through common metrics like up and down status, disk utilization, critical processes running on the server. They identify, classify, and resolve incidents based on rules that are preset. The logic is preset with GWP, like what is considered an incident. They perform firewall tasks. They do security management roles like monitoring all the devices, like I mentioned. And they do database administration, which includes monitoring users, roles, access, and the overall performance of databases. One of the sections for security management, so this is the only one that we noted was managed via ticketing system. That is the vendor's ticketing system. And using this ticketing software, they create security incidents or support tickets that they need or change requests. And this table here provides response time targets for these tickets. So as you see, there are 4 priority levels, and they have different response times. So for instance, priority 1, tickets should be resolved, should be responded to within 15 minutes, updated within an hour, and within 4 hours, resolution should be provided. Invoicing happens, we pay the vendor using 3 different types of invoices. The first couple are recurring invoices on a monthly basis. The first one is the largest one, managed services. This is for bulk of the services that they provide, the virtual missionware environment, backup and restore, network Windows server environment, and it is a flat fee from month to month. The managed security portion can change on a monthly basis because it's dependent on the number of devices that they're supporting for us. And then lastly, the ad hoc hours are can be utilized and invoiced based on hourly charges, and there are very specific designated criteria for us to use the ad hoc hours. They're capped at 200 per fiscal year. The objective of the audit was to determine whether the city has established adequate controls to ensure the contract provisions are administered appropriately by the vendor and city staff. The scope is July 1st, 2022 to April 11th, 2023. To perform the audit, we follow standard protocol that we do for almost every single audit, review the contract terms, deliverables. We interviewed city and vendor staff. We delved into reviewing the way the vendor performs these deliverables to understand what completion looks like on the city side. We also reviewed quite in detail a sample ticketing report, invoices, and the contract has some data security requirements that we also reviewed. We identified 5 improvement opportunities. I will be presenting them to you in these 4 slides related to service delivery, shared responsibilities, invoicing, and data security. So for the first one, service delivery was the big one in the audit. So as we're reviewing this PSA, we noted a laundry list of tasks that are outlined in there, and so going in, we wanted to get a sense from city staff as to how they're monitoring all of these very detailed tasks. Some of them were very broad. So they didn't have a documented kind of walkthrough document, so to say, from the PSA to what's actually being done in practice. So we had to work with the vendor, and we're actually very happy with the collaboration because they provided a lot of documents in support of what they're doing. It's just something that we didn't see was that very kind of formalized process of seeing what's in the PSA and how it's being performed in practice. So that's our recommendation, is to formalize that process a little bit more. On the second recommendation here on response time targets, as I showed in the previous slide, for the tickets, they have that. I reviewed 373 closed tickets from the scope, July 1st, 2022 to April 2023. 75% of the tickets did not meet those response times targets for the incident resolution. Now, per GWP, the reason behind the target not being met is not that the work is not actually being done, but it's just the tickets are not being closed on time. So we recommend really evaluating this response time target to see if it needs to be, it needs to be revised to meet business needs, or if it's useful, then enforcing these targets. We also noted that there were no documented methods for how most of these PSA deliverables, and when I say deliverables, there are over 100 tasks that are listed, right? And so they're, the vendor is using an Excel tracking sheet to keep track of all the projects that they're working on. City staff are meeting with the vendor on a weekly basis to review these projects. They have IT's help system is being used. The vendor has a ticketing system. So just actually tagging where each deliverable, how it's being tracked would be helpful in this instance with a scope this large. And then clarifying usage of ticketing systems. So as I mentioned, IT's help desk is used and the vendor's ticketing system is used. We've been told the IT ticketing system is used for certain password resets. So just clarifying exactly what, how this is being done, documenting that a little better would be helpful. The second audit result, shared responsibility. So as we reviewed, as you can imagine, this is outsourced IT. There would be areas where there might be room for collaboration with our IT department. So we did see some areas, we haven't publicly disclosed them due to security sensitivity, but these areas need to be communicated better, defined, communicated to IT so that everyone is on the same page on who's doing what. Next, Jesse. Invoicing. So the genesis of this audit was as an IT request because they're reviewing the invoices. They wanted to see more support. And so we recommend attaching more support in the workflow, in our financial system workflow to, as you're reviewing the invoice, knowing which projects are being completed and what devices, how many devices are being supported month to month, so that IT staff can get a better comfort level as they're approving these invoices. And then on the ad hoc hour invoice side, we did see 1 hour that was charged that was actually in scope. It was listed as out of scope. It was for $200. This has been communicated to the vendor and they will credit that back. But the recommendation here is to just, they're performing detailed documentation of these hours, but tagging these specific categories that are listed in the PSA would be helpful so that we don't end up incurring extra charges like that. On the data security side, so the PSA has requirements for the vendor to provide a SOC 1 and a SOC 2 report. We were able to get the SOC 2 report, and the difference between these is a SOC 2 is based on is for system controls versus a SOC 1 is financial. So we were not able to get the SOC 1 or similar report. And second, we recommend obtaining the required service organization control reports. And so there are some controls that are listed in these SOC reports that the vendor should communicate to city staff. So we recommend that they do this. And then lastly, there were 2 subcontractors identified in the PSA, to the PSA, that the vendor had not communicated or sought approval from the city prior to service delivery. So we recommend that city staff ensure that all subcontractors are identified to this PSA and formally provide consent for their use prior to service delivery. That concludes my presentation. I would like to thank GWP staff for their assistance during the project. Michelle Knoll, Utility Business System Support Administrator, and I are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. All right, any questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions. So when I read the report, I feel there's a lot of good findings, but it's hard to understand what were we expecting when we wrote the contract. So when you talk about specific deliverables that aren't there, I'm wondering what we're really paying for, because I would expect as a person being provided service, there should be some type of metrics or reports of, hey, here's how many times somebody tried to hack us, and here's how we stopped it, or things of that nature. So it makes me feel like what was, again, I know that this is an audit of the process of how the contract came in place, but it kind of goes back to that, because even the SOC 1, I would assume a company like this is providing this type of service to many companies. So it would behoove them to have that, and why wouldn't we have asked for that when we wrote the contract? Those are things that I kind of, I'm trying to understand, because big picture, if I took a step back from the audit, it feels like a lot of these things would have been addressed through a better contract. And then these are just kind of the symptoms of a root cause of the contract.
Right, yeah, I think, I agree with you. I think the recommendations kind of flow from what you're saying. It's not that the contract is not detailed enough, it is very detailed, and maybe it suffers from being too detailed in certain respects, but it is detailed in certain ways, and in certain ways it's too broad, like there, it has over 100 deliverables, but certain of those could benefit from being more detailed in terms of, for instance, change management is one of them, right? That's a very broad topic. What would completion look like for the city? So those are some questions that we've also kind of asked city staff on to reviewing these tasks in detail. And it's not that the vendor's not performing them, right? But actually having the base from which we are going to be working, we need to have that. And then the vendor can fill it in, we can monitor in various ways. So that should help the process, yeah.
And then when you talk about the ticketing system and the projects that are being monitored, I guess, is that a result of a very detailed contract that you're referring to? Or like, I'm trying to understand what these tickets are.
So the tickets are essentially, a bulk of the tickets are alerts. So they're alerts that are set on predetermined rules. For instance, for suspicious activity or privileged access is being invoked. Things like that. Most of them are not actual threats, so we didn't see any priority one issues, and priority one being it's system-wide, known vulnerability that's being exploited, widespread system down. We didn't see any of those kinds of issues. It was more informational or suspicious login, but known ones, or login after hours. So that's what the ticketing system is generally used for.
So it sounds like the ticketing system is generating potential problems based on my first question of how are we actually measuring? Because that could be that ticketing system broken out into specific buckets might tell you, okay, here's how many times somebody tried to hack or somebody tried to access information.
Right.
And then they're stopping that through their processes.
Exactly. It's preventatively catching things that we should be looking out for.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Very good report, Ms. Antonesian. I have a couple of questions. Number one, when I was reading the report, and I forgot the name of the vendor, Signal?
Insight.
Insight,
Public
sorry.
sector, yeah.
Do we have similar type of security management systems or vendors supporting other departments within the city, or it's only a GWP type of thing? I mean, I understand that the nature is different, but I was wondering.
A hard question to answer for me. I mean, it's more of an IT question.
It just crossed my mind because you were just saying that there's a lot of overlaps between, well, not a lot of, but there are some overlaps between some of the things that, this vendor does and for example, the IT department does. I'm assuming, for example, you buy a new computers break, somebody has to install password and things like that. Is that within the scope of work for Insight, or this is an IT department?
So there were very limited areas where we saw that wasn't necessarily areas where it was overlap, but it needed better definition of where the border was between IT and GWP. And GWP itself is one of the largest departments, if not the
Of course,
biggest
yeah.
one. So they do need their own IT support. So
I mean, generally, I totally understand that, but like in my brain, I'm kind of thinking this is an element of risk right there. So if there's any type of potential overlap and there's no clear delineation of who does what, I mean, that causes like, that's a risk area usually that needs to be probably addressed at some point. I had another question regarding the invoicing. You mentioned that there's like there are 3 invoicing, and 2 of them are recurring on a monthly basis, and then the third one is like the out of scope type of hourly. But then our contract only has 2 parts, like it's the 1.4 million, if I remember, or 1.3 million, and then I don't remember the other number, like I think 40,000 or something like that. Why do we need to have 2 separate invoicing if the total contract amount is set? Is there a rationale for that?
and Michelle Knoll might have a better answer, but I think both of those, so the managed services flat fee and the managed security, those cover the bulk of the contract, right? They provide for security and all of the managed services, and then the ad hoc are for just designated kind of out of scope reasons that are very specifically outlined in the contract.
I mean, the reason I'm asking this question is because, like, in my brain, I like things to be simplified. I am on the hook to pay like $1.4 million. Send me 12 invoices, set amounts. I understand that on each invoice you have details listing, what has happened and all of that, but do we really need to have that?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Audit Committee. I'm Michelle Knoll, Utility Business System Support Administrator. So through the audit, one of the recommendations that she found was that they had subcontractors. So Foresight is a subcontractor that does security monitoring for Insight. And so I think that's why they have, because we're monitoring different devices between the managed services and the security monitoring. So the security monitoring, depending on when we're decommissioning services or adding additional, decommissioning servers or adding additional services, that will fluctuate. So that, so they invoice that separately because that's a separate function versus the managed services are more for managing the operations and critical systems that we have.
Is it because of the details or the documentation that they provide with each invoice that, you kind of
Correct.
feel? Okay.
Correct. And the security monitoring actually puts the number of devices each month that they're monitoring. And so now we're going to be adding in what those differences are each month. So we're maybe decommissioning 2 and we're adding 1. And so that's what makes up that new total. Whereas the managed services, we do that annually.
But if the total cost of the contract is fixed, what is the?
Well, it's fixed, but annually we look at what we decommission. Like this year, we decommissioned a couple of e-centers. So we migrated that with ISD. So those are the services that she was talking about that were crossing over. So those would reduce our annual cost per year. So this year, I think we're saving another $5,000 in total cost. And in response to your question about crossover services, so we used to have our own backup and recovery. We used to have our own storage facility that we maintained, and our managed services always helped us support that. And so during the transition of last year, we migrated over to ISDs to save in cost for their backup and recovery and also for the storage. So those are some of the things that we need to identify, and then when we true up each year, we need to make those adjustments.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to follow up on that. So, because I think you make an interesting point. But so at the end of the day, it's really understanding what we're paying for, even though it's a fixed fee, so that we can manage future contracts?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And are we saying then, since you said Glendale no longer keeps the records, it's sitting on their cloud?
Well, no, Glendale City IT is managing the storage for us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had one general comment regarding the report, and this applies to all of the reports that I have read. Again, for people like myself, I'm not a non-technical person really in these matters. It's always helpful to have like a list of abbreviations in the beginning of the report. So I read the PSA. I thought, well, what does public service announcement have to do with any of this? Then I read the table, and then I go down and I see you have explained what the PSA is. Just like usually if you put something, I know you have a list of definitions at the very end, but there are some abbreviations specific to that report. It would be really helpful to have like a little area on the top of the report just to define those. Thank you.
Good point. Ms. Tanesian, I heard you speak about shared services within the IT. Now, what is that consistent of? I know you talked about it, but for me, I'm looking at more as to this is specifically for GWP, this IT infrastructure you have. Does this mean we have an IT department here in the city of Glendale that supports them as well and other departments, or is it just?
Right, so IT supports all departments, right? But they don't have the capacity to support GWP. So GWP has outsourced a bulk of its IT services, if not all, right, Michelle? So,
yes.
right. And those shared responsibilities, like I said, are just a few of the areas that we saw that needed better defining.
Okay. Sounds like an interesting system to be getting. I mean, I didn't even see what costs involved is with the city for this specific software or service they're offering, but not sure if there is some savings analysis that's been done or analysis from the standpoint as to, well, what about if we bring additional more staffing in-house? Would that cover the cost of what we're being invoiced?
As I said, IT doesn't have enough resources to perform this for GWP, but it would require, if we were to do this in-house per GWP, this would require at least 4 FTE, which for managed services and the security monitoring, which would include a system engineer, network engineer, DBA, and security officer that are familiar with supporting critical systems. And as you may know, it's hard to retain IT talent in government, so that's why you often see these types of agreements in especially local government.
Great. Thank you for that explanation. No other questions, team? All right. Thank you very much. Great report. Appreciate it. Let's go to the next section of the agenda.
So, let's see. The next presentation is on the PCI compliance audit. We have done it at least 3 times a year, so you're probably very familiar with it. And today, we'll make sure that each year we do one full version of it. But today we're going to do a short version of the PCI presentation, and we will start with page 10. You can start here. So we'll skip the those background, the introduction, and all that. We'll just go right into the very specific to this round of audit.
Welcome back, Ms. Minami Valdivia, right?
Thank you,
All right.
yes. Good afternoon once again, Chair Patajon and fellow Audit Committee members. Again, my name is Natalie Minami Valdivia, and I'm the Senior Internal Auditor within the Internal Audit Division. So as Jesse mentioned, we're going to start with slide number 10 and jump right into the meat of the audit and talk about why we do these audits. So as you know, we perform these audits to demonstrate ongoing compliance, to identify deficiencies timely, and to prepare for the annual audit, as well as to raise awareness. And as far as frequency goes, as Jesse mentioned to you, we conduct, this go-round is the second audit of the calendar year 2023, and as you can see, there are a total of 19 sites, 5 systems, 29 tasks, and during our second audit, we reviewed 8 sites, 2 systems, and 6 tasks. The objective of this audit is to determine the city's ongoing compliance with the PCI policies and procedures. And the scope of this audit is based on PCI, so it's payment card industry data security standard in-scope requirements as defined by the external qualified security assessor. In order to accomplish our objective, our audit process included conducting site visits, performing system assessments, and verifying calendar events. So you might ask, what do we look for when we do our site visits? So the site visits include reviewing the reviewing the updated policies and procedures for the departments, performing a walkthrough of the site of their credit card transaction process and the types of credit card payments they receive, and these include in person, over the phone, or by mail, and then verifying that employees are aware of the department's PCI policy and they know where to locate it, comparing the serial numbers on the equipment or the devices to the device listing, and reviewing the tamper logs, and lastly, verifying that all employees that are handling credit card transactions have completed the required PCI training. So next, we look at the systems, and for the systems reviews, we review the attestations of compliance documents, we review the contracts for the PCI contract language, and we also perform system reviews to confirm that the full 16-digit credit card number is not located within the system, and confirm that the system password policies or settings agree to the department's policies or the system policies. Next, for the calendar tasks, we reviewed this go-round, the documentation of compliance, that the quarterly team meetings were being held, that the vulnerability scans were being performed, and that the PCI DSS tracking document is being maintained with the third-party service providers' contracts and attestations of compliance. So as a summary of our results, as I mentioned, we reviewed 8 sites, and out of those 8 sites, there were 3 sites that we identified exceptions. We reviewed 2 systems, and there were no exceptions within those 2 systems, and also there were no exceptions noted in the 6 tasks reviewed. So to provide you with a summary of findings, based on our audit, we found that there were 2 employees at one site that either processed or could process credit card transactions that hadn't completed the required PCI training. We also identified that tamper log reviews weren't being consistently reviewed at 3 sites. And then lastly, we identified that there was a tamper seal that was damaged. So the current status of these items is the PCI training observation has been remediated, so the department has disallowed or doesn't allow those employees that haven't received training to process credit card transactions until they have completed the required training. The tamper log review is currently in process. Our city treasurer's office is working to create a new template that will be pre-numbered and will include the serial numbers and the tamper seal numbers to facilitate the review by the different sites and to make it more readily apparent when the tamper seal reviews are not being performed. The tamper seal inspection has also been remediated. So in this case, the tamper seal covers 2 portions of the back of the pin pad, and one is a screw that protects the internal contents, and then one is a compartment that has the ability to easily be opened. In this case, when we discussed the item with our PCI DSS QSA, it was decided that since the more critical portion was left intact, it wasn't considered a PCI issue. However, in this case, they did request and replace the seal. Well, I guess the seal has been replaced, so it's been remediated. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions. I'm here to answer any questions.
Committee members?
Yeah, I have a question. That tamper log process that's being worked on, my understanding is you've been doing these PCI audits every quarter to prepare for the annual. Is this the first time you found that? And if so, how come, like, it's interesting that as many times as you've done it, that you wouldn't have found that before?
Okay, so the tamper logs currently, they do list the dates out. However, because they're not pre-populated, it's not easily identifiable that there are days missed in between. Because some of our facilities, for example, our community services and parks, there are days that they may be open 7 days a week, depending on whether the facilities are rented out. So by pre-populating the dates, it'll allow them to designate or to document the days that they're open and then the days that they're closed. Because, for example, if they're open on a Sunday because it's rented, you would have to know that they were open and closed on the other days. So we think that by pre-populating the dates, it'll give better visibility to ensure that we're tracking it more carefully.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I don't have any questions, thank you.
I have a question. So they're using a ThinkPad, you said, right? To process credit card transactions? What system are they using that?
To be honest, I'm not sure what the name of the system is. They're a pen pad and a terminal. So it's like the one, our bank is Bank of America, so we get the equipment, I believe, from Bank of America.
Okay. So, you know, we've been here for several years now, right? And like you said, it's actually the first time I think we heard about the tampering that I've heard before compared to other times. So not sure how, I guess other times we never caught that, the tampering of the device. So you went to 8 site visits this time.
Correct.
Are those site visits, I know they're all different locations. How many overall totals do we have out there? What?
It was
Because you've done so far year today, I believe.
19.
19, right? Mm-hmm. And so we've done 8.
We've actually we completed 5 last quarter and 8 this quarter, so we've completed 13 in this cycle.
Okay. And those site locations, are they, are we able to find out by name instead of like location of site locations instead of just identifying them by a number?
So that's that is purposely done. We don't want to disclose anything that may have any bring us any security concerns. So.
But you guys internally, I'm assuming you're keeping track of each
We know
location, right?
exactly which one it is.
I see. Okay.
And in terms of the question earlier, you know, why didn't we see it before? Not sure exactly why, but then different auditors performed the audit, and even the QSAs. The city had a new QSA last year, and they had different opinions on things. So as we mentioned, maybe not this one, and when we did the full version, we talk about the audit scope. We follow what the QSA's annual assessment. So then there could be some adjustment made as well. Yeah. So.
I think in the past I've heard where we've had folks that they were terminated and they had access to the system still. Do we look into that this audit?
So this is the first time. That portion of the audit was included within all of our previous audits, so it was a general step in each of our audits. However, we've because it's kind of not the same as it's not the core of the audit. It's been separated out and included within our continuous audit. So in your audit report, you'll see we completed a continuous audit project specifically on the rec track system that we reviewed, and there were exceptions identified, and we reported those exceptions to the department, and they've already been remediated. They've been removed.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, because I know it's always an issue that we see where there's always, access still to terminated employees in the system. So, so I was curious why it wasn't in this audit report, but that's fine. Thanks for the explanation.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Chair Parahon. We actually made an internal decision or change. So for access control, every time we do an audit, if there is a system involved in that operation, we always do a user access control testing for the system. And then we, like you said, we always found issues with the access controls. So then to me, when we present the audit report to you and then have that finding in that report, it's a little bit out of place. And then we do want to have a better track of all the systems that have these issues. So yeah, I was going to cover that in our continuous auditing section. So we streamline the process for all the, we call it UAC, User Access Control, APP. APP is application, so any application. So we bring that into the, as part of the continuous auditing, tracking, and the reporting.
Great, thank you for the explanation. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All righty, moving on. Let's move on to the next item.
So moving on to the second section of this 6A report is the in-progress audit. We have one. Ani just barely started the audit right before the year end. So I'm not sure when this one will be done. The reason being there's a serving other cities practice component in this, so then it may take longer. So we are not sure, but we always try to get it done. So hopefully you will hear it soon. The next section is continuous auditing, and let me move this along as well. Let me shrink it a little bit. Okay. So for this past quarter, as you can see, we have completed 3 continuous auditing testing, and one is a UAC ADEE, which means User Access Control, Active Directory to Employee listing. And then the second one is duplicate payment tests. We didn't find any duplicate payment for this round of test. And then the UAC APP rec track is the one that I mentioned earlier. We started to streamline and then to report all the user access control testing under continuous audit testing section. Let's see, next section. So the next 3 sections cover the internal audit follow-up activities. Section 4 basically provides a high-level summary of the number of outstanding audit items that we've followed up on with the department. And there were 14 projects with a total of 63 audit items, of which 11 items were implemented and 2 were not implemented, and 50 items remain outstanding at the end of the quarter. And we have one priority 1 audit item listed, which is the Shoal Canyon Landfill JPA host fee and the lease payment audit. A portion of this item has been completed, and it's should I mention it here? So we actually, I'm going to cover it later on when I do the work plan, but I can't wait. So anyhow, so the part that has been completed is the city actually received close to $1.8 million from the district for the underpayment that Ani has identified in her audit. So here. And then the remaining portion from this item is to work with the district to have the sufficient supporting documentation submitted to the city along with the payments so that our finance department or public works staff can review the calculation. And then Section 6 is outstanding audit items meeting audit committee discussion criteria. This time we actually have a variety of items, not like happy these are here, but this is a time to actually be able to have examples to show what each criteria really mean. So for the first one, determination is made to change status of an audit item to not implemented. This one is actually, okay, let me go back. So there are three. One is to change the status to be not implemented. One is if it's within 2 years, it's not implemented. And then the third is 3 years. So when you hit 3 years, we deem the item is not implemented and we'll stop following up on that. So then back to the first one, it's been only 2 years. However, the department decided that they're not going to implement this recommendation due to limited staffing resources. And then the second item is hit the 2 years mark. So then this is from the same audit, so it's been 2 years. And then the second item the department actually going to continue to work on, which is to document the detailed policies and procedures. The last category is the items has not been implemented within 3 years. So then basically you hit 3 years, if it's still outstanding, we deem it's not implemented and we'll stop following up on it. And for this one, it's actually the city staff, GWP staff, city attorney's office has been working with the school district, have made progress, but it's just, when the external parties involved, it's kind of out of our control. So this one is not progress made, but not completed. And we mark it as not completed, and we're not going to continue to follow up on this item. So any questions on the follow-up section?
Thank you for the report. I have a question. The items that you said not to be implemented within the 3 years of the report date. All those 3 items, it's been going almost 3 years now on those. So what impact does these items have from the standpoint of, because I see one of them is for the recycled audit, and I'm assuming that's related to how much reimbursement we're receiving. So if we're not auditing that, how much impact are we seeing from that section?
So are you talking about the Hoover Toll recycle
Yeah.
audit? Richard, you want to answer that?
Yes. Well, excellent question. I think it's accurate to say, are at an impasse with the Glendale Unified School District as to what their portion of paying for the on-site retrofit costs to actually serve them recycled water will be. If an agreement is not reached, that pipeline has already been built. utilizing or intended to utilize $1.6 million grant. So that cost to us would be $1.6 million. However, the silver lining, the recent discussion and I will say intent is to convert it to a potable line, which is a huge benefit to the city. In fact, the potable lines serving that area are already 90 years old and more, so they are on the schedule to be replaced anyway. If we utilize this pipe that has already been installed as a potable line, it just means we've already replaced that old potable line. If we were to replace that pipe today, it would cost $2 million plus. So in a sense, there's a savings because we put it in, a few years ago. That's where we stand now.
Great, thank you for the clarification. Anyone else has any questions?
Yes, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm not as familiar, I wasn't part of the audit committee at the time, but what I'm hearing from you is that there was a cost to put in a pipe they're not willing to pay, even though they said they were going to pay?
Oh, the cost to put in the actual lateral, the pipe that runs down the streets to serve the school, was to be paid by a grant from the state.
Okay.
Reimbursed once that recycled water was actually being used by the schools. Once a connection was made and the water was flowing and being used, then you get their grant reimbursement. The cost that is under debate is the cost for the on-site retrofit on school property to make that recycled water actually usable, separating the potable system from recycled system on the school site.
Got it. So because they're not willing to.
They're not willing to pay, I don't want to get too out of line here, but they're not willing to pay anything, even though they are reaping the benefit of.
So the pipe sits until that can happen, but
Correct.
now you're going to be able to
Correct.
utilize it for something else.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. The first one is a risk management feasibility study between the city attorney and the city manager. Due to limited staffing resources, this item will not be implemented. Is that a satisfactory answer? To say you don't have enough staff, so we're not going to implement it, and this is coming from June 30th, 2021? What were they doing from June 30th, 2021 until June 2023? And why is it that they have limited staff when this is supposed to be to evaluate the feasibility of implementing a framework to better align the mission between the city's mission and the city council's priorities? Sounds a little bit more than just, we don't have an extra clerical person, or we don't have an extra someone who can't put X number of hours to do it. We're just going to not implement it. But this has to do with the city, it has to do with the city attorney, it has to do with the city manager, and it has to do with the city council. Who decides they're not going to implement it, and why is that acceptable, and what do we have to do with this? If this hits one of the buttons that we get to review it, I'd like to review it and get a more satisfactory answer than 2 years ago. We said we needed this, and after 2 years, we say we don't need it, or we're not going to implement it. So I find this to be a totally unsatisfactory answer and an unsatisfactory action without any explanation.
So,
The second part of it, because there's two parts to this. Excuse me. Let me get back on. City attorney is documenting a risk management related practice so that they consistently perform and reduce the risk of business disruption in the event of employee turnover. The reason that this is being delayed until December 31st, 2023 is because of a transition in staffing resources. So a study to discuss how to not have a delay in business because of staffing changes is being delayed in the audit because of staffing changes. I'm sorry, but that sounds redundant and sounds like a non-answer to an answer. I mean, I come out of a lot of years in the entertainment industry and also in politics, and this is the kind of answer I expect to get from a staffer for a state elected official?
Good question. That's why we, when you say satisfactory or not, this whole section is set up for any of the items entering into these events. We request the department representative to come to the meetings to answer questions like what you just asked. So we have our city attorney, Mr. Mark Garcia, here to respond to that.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, and thank you for the questions. Let me answer the second one first. As was noted, part of the request on this particular audit was to document the procedures for the risk management function, which includes, and just so you're probably aware, but it includes all the claims that the city receives before filing lawsuits, our insurance process, both the procurement process as well as renewals. And again, the intent was to provide those procedures, and as we were getting ready to do that, we did have some turnover that occurred. And so unfortunately, the folks that would be helping us work on that departed, and actually one of those folks came back, and I'll tell you, and this goes to the issue of the staffing, our risk management function is not staffed how other organizations do it. Typically, there's a risk manager, there's an individual or two that works on the claims, and then there are individuals that work on the insurance process. Really, we've been working without a direct, and also there's a safety component too, which is now located in human resources. What happens is, in our department, it was really run by somebody who was our chief assistant city attorney, so the person that was overseeing our litigation. We did not have a risk manager, and we had somebody doing the insurance part of it, and then the claims was broken down in a couple of other pieces. So, long story short, one of those people left. Luckily for me, ended up coming back to work for the city. And so we are working on those procedures. We do not have a claims person right now. And so when we get that person on board, we will ask that person to help us put together the procedures for how the claims work. We are similarly doing the insurance piece. And so again, hopefully by the next time we report to you, we'll have that piece of it done. With respect to the other piece of it, and I'm not sure how much detail you got in terms of the analysis that was to be done, and we were asked to look at it. It was not something that came from us. We were asked to look at it. Was this more comprehensive risk management function where you're looking at what's called the HRM, and to look at it from a broader perspective. Both to do the analysis and to ever have the ability to implement it would require probably at least another 3 staff people. We looked at what some of the other cities were doing that have these functions, double the size of our staff, and we're just trying to be realistic and honest. We would never have the ability to do that. And so rather than spend the resource to prepare that study, we wanted to be a little bit more direct and say, this is just not something that would be in the cards any time in the near future. So I understand the frustration, and it's probably something we should have decided before we kind of agreed to look at it. But we just realistically would never have the ability to do that. I am hesitant to spend resources on something where we just would never be able to implement it.
Is it appropriate to ask who originally instigated the question to look into this, to do it? Was it a city council resolution?
Oh, no. It was in a conversation with the internal audit department. It was something that they had become aware of, that other jurisdictions were using. It's not a bad approach. It's a little bit more intensive. And so and I thought it was a good idea. I still think it's a good idea. And so we said, oh yeah, we'll look at it, and maybe we shouldn't have done that. And so that's on me.
Might I state for query, when you say that it's something which seems so critical, when you say after 2 years you're not going to implement it, would it have been more appropriate to be clearer in saying that this need for the project doesn't equal to the amount of staff we have, or something which says the reason we're not implementing it is because, just saying you're not implementing something without any substance of why is requiring this dialogue here. Couldn't an extra paragraph have solved 20 minutes of time? And just an observation for...
Point well taken.
Thank you.
It appears, to follow up on his point, that it's not that it's limited staff resources, or it is, but it's really a cost-benefit analysis that's been performed, and the value that an ERM process might
Right.
add does not equal to the additional cost. Because ERM is something that's been brought up for, I would say, at least a decade in many different forms.
Right.
And I've yet to see one company that does it really, really well. Because it's trying to capture everything risk related to an entity and housing it in one place. And I really think, to your point, there's multiple places where risk lies. And as long as it's being covered by those places, an ERM system, I'm not sure of the cost benefit either. But I think if you guys, and I don't know if you could have said it, but the cost benefit doesn't, like, it's been reviewed and cost benefit doesn't make sense, that might have been maybe better than just saying it's limited staff resources.
I appreciate that, and I agree. And I would note, too, that to your point, there are, the part of the risk function that's in my department has to do with the legal side, the claims, insurance.
Right.
There are other, like as you've no doubt probably heard before, our electric and water utility, they have their own risk management function that deals with certain things related to trading, for example.
Right.
So the functions of the operation that have risk assessments they need to do, they have them, and that's kind of what ERM goes to, right?
Correct. And internal audit is a function technically under
Exactly.
ERM as well. So it's really kind of gathering all these into one ownership, which may not always make sense.
I agree. Appreciate the comments.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just had one also quick comment. In cases like this, I'm sure there's always an explanation. Isn't our task to report this to the city council that, we failed in, or the committee stopped, or I don't know what is the best term to use here, was not implemented, at least to kind of tell the city council that there were some issues?
It's a good question. Actually, this report has been distributed to city councils. So all the
But in
activity
the
report-
letter that we are about to submit to the
that too. It's a different. That's annual report, and I was going to talk about that. So your annual report, along with our work plan, which is the annual report, will be submitted to city council next month, and this quarterly report, internal audit quarterly activity report, is distributed to city council at the same time when we distribute it to you guys.
Okay.
And Ms. Shang, is this distributed via email to city council, or is it presented to them in their folder that they get?
Emailed to them.
It's just emailed to them? Okay. No other questions? All right, let's move on to the next part of our agenda here.
Item 6B, fiscal year 2023 audit work plan review and proposed fiscal year 2024 audit work plan. Jesse Jung, internal audit manager.
All right. I do have a PowerPoint for that. Let me see. I think for the department representatives, your item is done, so you feel free to leave if you want to. So, okay, let me run this. But feel free to stay. I would like you to be here. All right. So, let's see.
I'm sorry?
All right. So Chair Parhong and Audit Committee members, once a year, we provide you a report on internal audit's work plan. So this PowerPoint presentation is prepared to walk you through this report. You probably heard this. So this annual report has two purposes. One is to provide you with an update on the internal audit activities and the performance for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023. And the second purpose is to provide you an overview of the fiscal year 2024 work plan development process and present you with the work plan itself. So this report includes an executive summary along with 3 exhibits. Exhibit 1 is fiscal year 2023 work plan status update. Exhibit 2 is the actual 2024 proposed work plan. And Exhibit 3 is the risk assessment survey questionnaire we used while preparing for this year's work plan. So a quick overview of the presentation. So in today's presentation, I will focus on answering 4 questions. What is a work plan? How is the work plan developed? How did internal audit do in fiscal year 2023? And what is planned for 2024? So what is a work plan? The work plan basically a to-do list for audit team to work on, and this to-do list is not an optional list. It's rather it's required by the Glendale Municipal Code. So the GMC section 202-130A states the internal audit division shall prepare an annual work plan based on assessment of relative risk. So as you can see, the work plan is a risk-based. So because of that, the to-do list is also a dynamic one and may be amended based on the changes to the risks. So we call it a dynamic to-do list. So now, well, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So now I would like to use this one diagram to provide you a high-level overview of the work plan development life cycle. We name this diagram the risk-based work plan development model, and you may also find this on the page 4 of the 6B report. So the work plan development life cycle includes 5 steps, but really it's a year-long ongoing process. So I will go into a little bit of detail on each of the steps. So step 1 is the starting point for the New Year's risk assessment process. It's basically the moment when we file this year's work plan with the City Council. A new risk assessment cycle has already started. Throughout the year, we receive information on new risks or new requests from various stakeholders. And we assess the risk of these new requests and make a determination on whether we should add them to the current year work plan or we add them to our audit universe. You heard that before. It's basically a long list of all the potential audit projects. And then we will discuss that at our annual risk assessment meetings with the management and see if those should be included in the audit work plan for the following year. Periodically, we conduct risk assessment throughout the year. In the past few years, what we've done is we provide a work plan update to the executive teams, and then basically asking them if there are any changes need to be made to the work plan, along with providing them information such as what the projects on the work plan have been completed, what we're working on, and what's coming soon. This year we did a, I probably will go mention it a few times, but continuous risk assessment. That's the idea when we did it quarterly before, but this year we created a SharePoint site, a risk assessment site. So in order for us to share the data analytics results with the management, so then it's basically officially launch our continuous risk assessment process. The next step, 4 and 5, these are all the annual process. I'll have a slide to talk to a little bit more on this. Annual risk is a more comprehensive process. We collaborate with management. And then the 5 is a review with CM and Audit Committee, and then we go back to the first step. So a little bit more information on the annual process. So we conducted data analytics, which includes the financial data to help us assess financial risk based on the cost center of each areas that they belong. And we conduct data analytics on the vendor data, and we identify the vendors that have a high dollar contract amount and the low remaining balance, and then if they the agreement will be expiring soon within the next 2 to 3 years. So we share that information with the management prior to the meeting. We conducted a risk assessment survey. This basically a questionnaire, and we asked each department to complete prior coming to the meeting. So basically it's the questionnaire guide the thought process on what you should think about when you propose an audit potential audit request to be included in the work plan. And then we conducted the risk assessment meetings with each department, and we discuss these topics. And then at the end of the meeting, we basically will have a top selected or proposed candidates by the department to be included in a short list that we can review with the city manager. So then once we have that list, we actually met with assistant city manager and the city manager, and then review the department's proposed audit candidates, and then city manager made the final selection to be included in this year's work plan. And this is today we review with you, the audit committee, and once after today's meeting, we'll prepare an annual report like Mr. Kashadrin mentioned earlier, the annual report. So we're going to have a note on file with City Council, 2 annual reports. One is the Audit Committee's annual report to City Council, and the second one is the annual our audit plan report to City Council. And then the whole process starts again. So a couple of changes we made this year. I already mentioned we formally launched continuous risk assessment process. To do that, we created the SharePoint sites to allow us to share information and share the data analytics we perform periodically with department. We received positive feedback from departments, and then so we plan to do it quarterly or as frequent as the data is available. Another one is a survey tool. So last year we used a Survey Monkey, and this year we used the free available Microsoft Forms that is a part of the Office 365. So all of these SharePoint sites and the things we implemented last year, the follow-up tracking sheets, the dashboards, all of these are created with the free available city offered tools. So we want to be more efficient without, purchasing expensive softwares and etc. So now this is a last year's work plan update. This is a quick summary of the numbers of the projects, but the detailed reconciliation is included in the Exhibit 1. So the original work plan had 25 projects, and we added 2 throughout the year, and the adjusted work plan number is 27, and the 22 out of the 27 have been completed at the end of the year, with 1 being in progress. So this is just a list of things that we continue to put effort in. Most of them are what we have been doing, and we have detailed descriptions in the report. And a couple things that new is the improved risk assessment process. That's I mentioned a couple times already, and the improved efficiency and the transparency that's related to the continuous auditing sites that we created. So continuous auditing testing supposed to be a really quick turnaround type of audit, and in the past, after we've completed the testing, we actually write a short memo and then distribute the memo along with the test results to the department. But this year we created this SharePoint sites. We put all the information about continuous auditing, the type of tests we perform, controls we test, is all on the site. And then instead of issuing a memo, we just send the result to the data owners if the follow-up is needed, and along with the link to the site, then they can access it anytime they want. It's always there. So now, finally, the current year's proposed work plan has a total of 23 projects. 1 is the carryover project that only started already, and 10 selected projects, and 12 continuous audit and ongoing advisory projects, a total 23. In addition to that, we'll continue to perform all the other activities such as a risk assessment, quality control system, quarterly follow-up, quarterly reporting to the committee, and the council, and then committee staff support, like Ani being the secretary to the committee. So that concludes my report for this year. Any questions?
Go ahead.
Chair, go ahead.
Unless Emma has any questions, I was in a mood that we acknowledge receipt of this and support it being passed on.
I just wanted to make a comment. It's a great report. Thank you very much for sharing all the great highlights and the accomplishments that were made. And also, I did see though, why is there 1 less this year than the prior year?
1 less. The number of
you have a completed
2.
in 2023 was 22. Now you have it 1 less, don't you?
25 last year, and we did 27, so now it's 23, so 4 less.
Okay, so we got a work cut out for a year, right?
Well, I was going to ask a question related to that. So it appears that 1 FTE, you're 1 FTE short. Somebody left, I think, in December.
Right.
Is the plan to fill that? Is that just a position you're looking for, or are you trying to continue the work without that extra person?
As of now, that the recruitment of that position has been put on hold. So we're not sure what's going to happen next. But for right now, the plan was created based on the current staffing when I say that, based on current staffing, is we always, on our plan, we always over-plan. We probably 15-20% over plan the number of projects. Yeah, so, but it didn't mean for us to complete 100% of the project of the plan.
I guess my question is, the plan for 24 is considering that there's 3 versus 4 of you.
Right.
Right, okay. I also had a question, not for this session, but in the future. I'm really interested in getting a walkthrough of your continuous risk assessment and SharePoint site. Is that something we can do in a?
SharePoint, yeah, we can SharePoint site. Let me see.
How do you utilize it? How does it help you guys do better? The whole share and learn together.
Let me see if I
No,
have it.
I don't know if we want to do it now. It's something that's interesting for the next session, I believe.
Yeah, we'll.
Maybe possible put it
for
in an agenda item.
I will share the I actually had a screenshot, but not there anymore. Yeah, so for the SharePoint side, we have 3 now. So one is for the risk assessment, one is for continuous auditing, and one is for the quarterly follow-up dashboards. Yeah. So, I mean, I was planning on sharing that if you guys want to. Just have a quick look at it, or you want to do it next.
Yeah, I'd rather wait till
Okay.
we can do a more thorough, because it'd be interesting as it's one of your key items kind of in your process to understand how that works.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Ms. Zhang, for the great report. I just noticed that under the fiscal year 23, there are 2 compliance type audits that have been reprioritized. I'm not exactly sure, like you dropped the priority to something that you don't need to, because if I recall, if my memory serves, parking citations, contract audit, did we discuss this? And then the other one was vehicle towing contract audit.
Right, so these 2 were actually on the top 20 when we shared with city manager, and these 2 didn't get picked. And the reason being for the parking, due to the COVID impact from the pandemic, so the vendor is slowly coming back to full capacity or going in that direction. So then the city manager said give them some time to perform, and then we'll probably do it next year. And the what's it about towing? Towing. So while we're working through, during the risk assessment process, this I actually looked a little bit into it, just to see if it's auditable or like it's worth our time to do a full audit on that. And I had a couple of things, and I shared with the city manager, and then he's basically saying he will communicate that to the department, and they can just address it rather than to do a full audit on that.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question.
Thank you.
Could I then restart my motion and say I move that we acknowledge the review of this and to send it forward?
I don't think we need a motion on this. It's more for
okay.
information. Yeah, so if you don't have any further questions, then we'll conclude this item.
Thank you. I don't think no more questions, right? No. All right, let's move on to the next item.
Item number 7, Audit Committee staff comments.
Well, there's no cards here for me either, so any comments from the group?
At the end of the minutes of 4/27/2023, in response to a question from one of our members, the city attorney representative said that she would give us an update on the Brown Act at this meeting. We don't have a member of the city attorney's office here, and I don't think
We
it would have been
do.
fair to ask.
You do, that's
The
me.
ci-
But I did not know that, and I'm not able to brief you on that. When Ms. Varpetian is back, I would assume at the next meeting, I'm sure she will be able to take that up again.
I did ask Lucy about that, and because she's not able to make to this meeting, and she said that she will, work on that in the following meeting.
Do we do Brown Act training on an ongoing basis quarterly, or is it done when there's an accumulation of employees that are covered by that? I mean, when I was a county commissioner, it was 2 hours with the county council, and there was about 20 of us in the room. So I was just curious if this is something that is only, the training is only implemented when there are numbers of people that need it or should hear it or are required annually to hear it.
Good question. So in the past, we have very few changes to the committee. So it's a steady 5 members. So then when we actually have a new member, Lucy actually provide that training at our first meeting, the meet and greet meeting. So, but for this time around, because there are so many changes, so she kind of postponed it and waiting for more members come on board, and then she can do one. And I think city attorney's office has another training, probably citywide, and go from commission to commission. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I'm sure when Lucy's back, and she will provide more information on that. It's either do the training next quarter, next meeting, or have more information for you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Any staff comments?
I just have a quick one, sorry. I just want to say thank you for the committee, each one of you, for your participation, your contribution to this committee, and allow us actually not missing any meeting. So really appreciate that. And throughout the year, for the input, the questions that you've asking, it's helped the city promote transparency and accountability, help us improve how we do our work, and then ultimately just basically help the city's Glendale community. And then I also want to thank my staff. I'm just amazed on how much we got done, so I really feel grateful for the hard work and the dedication. And then it's fun too. It's fun to work with smart and professional individuals like Ani and Natalie. So look forward for a fun year ahead.
Thank you. And I concur with your message as well. It's great to see all these great PowerPoints. It looks like you spend quality time putting them together as well, and it helps us understand, what's going on with the visual compared to the writing that you guys do here. So it's actually, all you guys do great work in regards to presenting to us. So thank you very much for a great year, all the hard work and effort. I'm looking forward to this coming year.
Thank you.
And if I'm not wrong, I just, if I may add something, you just mentioned that we were able to recover $1.8 million.
Yeah, that's the highlight. That's the
you
highlight.
mentioned that
I was
I-
going to mention it 3 times, but then we were kind of run out of the time.
So we recognize the great work that you guys did for this.
It's awesome, yeah. Congratulations. All right, next item on the agenda.
Item number 8, new business.
New business. I want to bring this up again. I think we brought it up a couple of meetings ago. Not sure what happened with that conversation, but we're talking about looking into maybe changing our meeting times. From, I believe community member here, vegetarian, he brought it up to our attention, and I think we tabled it or forgot what it was. But is there a process to look into seeing what works best for everyone?
Actually, two things to that. One is, yes, Ms. Kashadoing brought it up initially, and then we did do some research on that, but then I think you said it's okay, so that's why we didn't go ahead do the report. But even we do, there are really not much option. We looked at it, and this seems the very, maybe a couple options, and this is probably, there isn't, yeah. So this is probably the best option that we have.
I know it used to be early mornings, I believe it was Mondays at 8 a.m.
Right.
8 a.m., I think it was.
I hated those.
So
When I got here and got my cup of coffee, it was from the planning department because they had an early pot made and they opened at 7. But when I came here, it was like going into the Pentagon off cycle. Nobody around.
All right, so, and then we have, obviously, we haven't heard from our newest member about the time of this works best as well.
I mean, I would support if we consider that. I mean, my response was that if everybody else agrees and knowing that my absence or presence is not going to affect, quorum for the committee, I think, I said I'm okay with it, but I know right now, I mean, I understand, I mean, I know from my schedule that there will be times that I may miss on a Thursday afternoon. So if there's an opportunity for us to revisit that, and especially please note that this is a middle of the day type of thing for us. So it could effectively partitions your day. You have to kind of manage accordingly for the first part of the day, and then the second part doesn't always work, for me, but.
I personally would love Monday at 8 a.m., and I will bring you a fresh brew coffee from Coffee Bean personally. I will make sure, because I will want one myself, so I will bring you one if you guys commit to that, because I personally like early morning, and Monday kind of knocks it out, but I'm open to discussion with the rest of the group. But personally,
It's fine.
that
I
one works
already
really
have
well
the
for me.
report written, so basically we just didn't present it because I thought we're fine with the time. But if we want to revisit, we'll update that report and give maybe just a couple more options. There's really not a whole lot.
Yeah, thank you, yeah, because I think we should revisit that. And then also, for example, Jack's not here, and we'd love to hear his opinion as well. And as I think if we're all in favor of going back to Monday mornings at 8, I mean, I would love it because it's, it's a way to start your day doing this compared to late noon where you're rushing through traffic. I don't know about you guys. But I know there's been issues why we switched, I think, to to this time frame, and I believe it was because of staffing. The staff, I believe, no, wasn't staffing related. That why we switched.
I think
back then?
it's because we want to, because Monday morning, we're thinking people will not participate because it's too early. We want to promote
Community engagement.
more public participation.
We haven't seen public participate at all. I don't think they like, the audit committee as much as the other committees,
Right.
commissions out there. But I don't think, I guess it'll be more tied then to the committee members as to our availability as to if it will work for us best, transition.
No problem.
change.
We'll bring the report
Okay.
next
I'd say as
next
long as it's
meeting.
not Tuesday, because the last thing in the world you need is a committee meeting the same day you're having a city council meeting that evening. So.
We have, we'll bring the report. The choice is limited. That's,
And I'd like to try and at least, if we're going back to morning, can we make it 9 a.m. rather than 8 a.m.?
Well,
we'll see the availability when the report come back.
I like
It
you.
still gets us out at 11 before, still cuts the day pre-lunch, post-lunch.
Okay.
So she'll work on something on that. All right, so next, anyone else has any new business?
No.
No? All right, next item.
Item number 9, adjournment.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
That's my favorite one. Motion to adjourn.
All right. No roll call needed, right, on this? Adjournment?
I think we need a second.
Yeah, you need a second.
Okay.
All right. We're done. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank
Welcome on
you.
board, by the way. And I wasn't here when you were here last time.